Even empathy can be toxic. Let's explore this on today's video. We're all human. We all share similar feelings. We want our friends and loved ones to know, I get you. That's not just listening to the words they're saying, right? You're picking up their energy. You're sensing their emotions and their feelings. Having empathy is a healthy way to have friendships, relationships. Healthy parents need to demonstrate healthy empathy with their children. So if you're feeling exhausted psychologically or physically after interacting with somebody, if you're not able to stay with your own goals, your own path in life because you're so busy caretaking somebody else's path, if you're trying to just mirror back to somebody what they're sharing or telling you, but you find that later on, sometimes for days, you're still drawn into what they told you. If you listen, even though you really don't want to, you'd rather get away from them, but you feel obligated to stay. If you're somehow taking on physically the other person's stuff. So for example, they're saying, I have a knotted stomach, and then you realize your stomach is in a big knot. Or if somebody seems to be taking advantage of you, using you, but somehow you're justifying it by, well, I need to feel sorry for them. I need to pity them because they are having a hard time. If you're doing any of what I just mentioned right here, you may need to look at your toxic empathy. If that's the case, then the next step is to begin setting up healthy boundaries with everybody in your life and looking more inward internally at yourself, what's going on with you, rather than be so outwardly focused into what's happening with other people's lives. When someone's a bit of an empath or is capable of great empathy, they can easily take on another person's feelings to the point that they lose themselves. Where they end doesn't really end. It merges into the other person. It becomes very convoluted, also known as enmeshment, also known as codependence. So with toxic empathy, not only are we perhaps losing ourselves with another individual, but also we're not perhaps helping them grow. Sometimes to help people grow, we need to have firm boundaries, tough love sometimes with different people in our lives, depending on what's going on with them. If we have toxic empathy and just let anything come at us and then take that on, and perhaps we're full of anxiety and dread at that point, you're over-identifying with someone's feelings and taking them on as your own. Now, this is different from just hearing somebody, listening, perhaps mirroring back to them what you're hearing, showing and demonstrating and telling them that you really care. This sounds really tough what you're going through. You can imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. That's different from letting it overwhelm you and bringing you down with the ship, so to speak. A lot of kids who are raised by toxic parents, especially emotional abuse of some sort, like emotional incest, learn to survive through being very good listeners, but often too much so. They're walking on eggshells, they're always very hypervigilant. But this can easily cross over into toxic empathy for somebody like this. So it can range from somebody just showing a lot of empathy, but taking it on to where they feel overwhelmed. Maybe the person telling them is not really saying too much, but you're just picking up the energy. You're reading between the lines. Or somebody maybe is verbally dumping on you. Well, if you're a toxic empath, you're going to pick that up. Rather than, for example, having a healthy boundary and saying, I think you need to get some help with that. I hear what you're saying, but it also sounds like you're volunteering to stay in the situation that you're now complaining about. So there's different degrees of this, right? There's different situations. But if you're a toxic empath, you're likely going to be taking all of this in without dissecting it a bit. Some people need tough love. You may need to put up healthy boundaries to some. Does that mean you don't care? Does that mean you're being ruthless? Does that mean you're being callous? Does that mean somehow you're being a bad friend, bad coworker, a bad husband or wife? No, we all have to find healthy boundaries for ourselves so we don't get sucked into other people's stuff. This way nobody wins, right? If we're all sucked into it together. And again, to the point I mentioned a few minutes ago, many times people who are spewing out the verbal diarrhea when they want to, they're not used to emotionally regulating themselves on some level. So showing one cares and sitting with them in perhaps deep grief, deep sadness, hearing their anger. And we can listen to any and all of these things, but within healthy limits. Healthy relationships are where both individuals' needs are met, and there's a fairly equal playing field. Somebody who may think they're a toxic empath has to begin to realize that they have to separate, distinguish their own needs and their wants from another person's needs and wants. This is also referred to sometimes as being emotionally hijacked. Now somebody who's taking on someone else's feelings to a high degree forgets about their own needs, what they're all about, having healthy boundaries. In fact, maybe even saying to somebody like, this is a little too much for me to hear right now, because this takes practice. Kids who are not raised with a strong foundational identity have to build those layers as they get older. They have to create a new pattern for themselves where they're on an equal playing field with others. And sometimes they even come first, just depending. This is the opposite of toxic empathy. If you're still figuring this out a bit, let's look at the opposite. If you're raised by narcissistic parents who are known to show little to no empathy, that can be very troubling in one's life. A child isn't able to healthily connect with a parent. Or we can even go further on the spectrum all the way to a sociopath, a psychopath. When there's a personality structure with no empathy involved, that's called a psychopathic personality. Is toxic empathy a part of your life? Please feel free to describe this in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.